Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES for 10% off any purchase over $10. If you use that promo code between now and January 28th, you will automatically be entered in a drawing to win a Ravnica Allegiance booster box. Check out the description below for details. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to part 5 of our 5-part Ravnica Allegiance full set review. Today we're talking about Gruul. We're going to be looking at all of the cards with Gruul watermarks, as well as any green card that has no watermark. If you've been watching the series, you know what to expect here. This is a limited set review, so we're going to look at each card individually and discuss how it can best be utilized in the limited formats Drafter Sealed. Quickly before we get started, just a fast reminder, if you check out the description below, you'll find a few ways to support the channel and what we do here. Our Patreon page is down there. You're also going to find links to products on Amazon. If you make any purchases on Amazon, we'll get a small percentage no matter what it is if you go through those links. Finally, Flipside Gaming still offering a promo code for our viewers. Hopefully you can save a little cash while you support us. But as always, thank you not only to the folks that look at those links, but to all of you. Y'all make the channel what it is. So thank you, and let's get into it. Axebane Beast. Wow, this is a slow start. Not a lot to say about this card. It's a fine curve filler, a 3/4. It's got some substantial size to it for 4 mana, especially in Gruul. You'll probably appreciate this, but you're not always going to play it. Sometimes you're going to have better things. Biogenic Ooze. Wow, talk about going from one of those boring kind of vanilla cards to some crazy mythic. Well, here you go. This card is phenomenal. If you have a chance to play with it, play with it. It's 2 on color with green. It's not very splashable, but that's the only bad thing I can say about it. I don't care if you're in Gruul. I don't care if you're in Simic. I don't care what you're doing. If you can cast this thing, play it. For 5 mana, you're quickly getting 4/4 power toughness on the battlefield, almost immediately turning into 6/6 power and toughness. And then later on, as long as you have 3 green and 1 to pour into this every time, you're going to make another one of these Ooze tokens, which will grow as long as this is still in play. That will synergize with those cards that care about +1/+1 counters that we saw the other day. Your opponent needs to find an answer for this. If they don't find an answer for this card, they're going to be losing pretty quickly. They either need to finish you off quickly in the air, or they got to get rid of this thing, or else they're going to be in for a bad time. Biogenic Upgrade. A little expensive at 6, but it's really good. You're putting a number of counters on your creatures, and then you're getting to double the counters that are on those creatures. It could lead to a big play. On the flip side, it might lead to no play if you have no creatures. That's the only downside here, especially considering the cost of this card. It is a little shaky that it is dependent on board state. But you know what? Sealed, draft, you're going to be playing a lot of creatures, especially if you're in green, right? I wouldn't not play this just because I'm concerned about that. Play this. You could actually sometimes pull out a win with this. Simic will enjoy this because not only will making big creatures be good always, but also there are cards that care about +1/+1 counters. We saw them a few days ago. Gruul will appreciate this too. They have trample creatures, which will be readily available most likely. Putting counters on a trample creature could get pretty crazy, maybe even be game ending. Ultimately, it's a good uncommon. If it's available to you, I'd try to play with a copy. End-Raze Forerunners. This is a very good rare, but it's also very expensive. It's 3 on color and 5. Not every deck's going to be able to swing that. Now, if you're in green and it's one of your core colors, well, you should be able to cast it for the 3 green. 5 on top of that. If you have a little ramp back up, which maybe you do in green, well, then this card actually gets really strong. Here's the thing. This could be game ending sometimes if you're wide enough, or maybe you have some other creatures that just haven't been able to get by, like a board stall, and they need that extra push. Well, this will definitely do it. And even if that's not the case and you just play this into an empty board, it's still going to be a 7/7 Vigilance Trample Haste creature. That's going to be real tough to deal with as well. So this card's phenomenal, but know your deck. If you think you can pull it off, go for it. If you don't have that confidence in your mana base, then maybe you skip it. Enraged Ceratok. This is real solid. It's a 4/4 for 4, and it can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. So it can't be chump blocked by tiny creatures or afterlife tokens, for example. It can't be joint blocked by a couple 2/2s. It's going to be tough for your opponent to stop this in the mid-game. If you play this on turn 4, they could be taking some damage from it. Also, I really like this card in Simic because if there's some ways to get +1/+1 counters on it, now it gets even harder to deal with considering you can't chump and you can't put a bunch of small creatures together when you joint block. This is really, really solid for 4 mana. Another strong uncommon here. Gatebreaker Ram. So all week we've been seeing these cards that will reward you for having gates. And that's good in the draft situation where you just get stuck and you can't seem to get into a guild and then you have to go 4 or 5 colors or something like that. Start picking up gates and these will get passed to you and they can be powerful with the gates, right? So this is another one of those cards. Now the question I like to ask though with these cards is, do I ever play this if I'm not on a pure gate strategy? Yeah, maybe. If I have perhaps 3 gates in my deck, I might consider it. I don't want to play this as a 2-2 for 3. Like, that's not going to be good. A 3-3 for 3, well, that's okay. A 4-4 with Trample and Vigilance for 3, well, that's where you want to be, right? So know your deck. If you feel like you have enough gates to get some value here, you could run the thing. It's definitely good with gates. But if you don't feel like you're going to have a gate in play when this comes up most of the time, I'd skip it and get something else. Gift of Strength. This one's a reprint. I found all the reprints all week. I've been saying we haven't seen a lot of reprints. Well, they're all in green. This one is kind of a giant growth style effect, but it gives the creature reach as well. You're paying 1 more for it, though. Great combat trick. I mean, it can surprise your opponent if they come at you in the air or on the ground, and you can also surprise your opponent if you're attacking and use this a little more offensively. I think Gruul is going to really appreciate this again because of the trample creatures that you're going to find in those colors. Guardian Project. Forecasting cost enchantment does nothing on its own, but you know what? I actually like this. It is maybe a little annoying that it needs other plays for it to do anything, but it's not asking for all that much. You just need to play a creature, a non-token creature, that you don't have a copy of already in the battlefield or the graveyard, which, in a limited game, that's going to happen relatively frequently. Now, this might be better sometimes in Sealed than Draft, where Draft you might be picking up a lot of creatures at times that are the same, more so than you would have in a Sealed pool on average, but you know what? Either way, I don't think this is going to be bad for you. As a matter of fact, I could see myself splashing this even if green wasn't one of my core colors. It's just a really solid enchantment that's going to allow you to work through your deck quickly. Mammoth Spider. This is another reprint. Not a lot to say about this one. This feels more like a Simic card to me than a Gruul card, although it's going to be fine in both situations. Simic might like this because I think they want to slow things down more so than Gruul does. Gruul's about stompy, big trample creatures, haste, just get in there and rumble. And Simic is a little more calculating. So this is going to slow down the game, which is what Simic kind of wants to do. But again, it is splashable if you're having trouble with flyers in any color. Something to consider out of the sideboard. Open the Gates. Now this is going to be great if you have a lot of gates in your deck, of course, and you're trying to get those gates out because you have some of those gate payoff cards. But maybe more frequently, you'll just simply use this to color fix or make sure you hit your land drops. It only costs 1 at sorcery speed, especially if I'm splashing a 3rd color or going a little deeper into a 3rd color, which does happen a lot. I mean, that did happen a lot with Guilds of Ravnica 2 and Sealed and Draft. So there's many occasions where you're going to be happy to have something like this, just to smooth out your mana. Rampage of the Clans. When I first saw this card, I thought, it's too bad it's rare. If it was like uncommon, maybe I would try to draft around it or something. I don't know how good that strategy would be, but there are some good enchantments in this set. If you could grab a bunch of enchantments and some artifacts and try to turn them all into creatures later, pump those creatures or something, I don't know. Probably not really that good. But in reality, what I might do with this card, if it was one of my rares, is just bring it in out of the sideboard if my opponent has a problematic artifact or an enchantment. Now the downside is now you have an answer to the enchantments and artifacts, but you have an answer to the creatures, right? So if you're in green, maybe you do. I mean, maybe you have a lot of creatures you can gum up the ground, or perhaps you have a lot of removal spells or something. And if that's the case, well, okay, this might be alright for you. But if that's not the case, then you might have another problem on your hands. So the card's a little bit awkward in that regard. But if you have it, don't forget it's in your sideboard. Regenesis. This is an awesome uncommon. Tons of economy here. It costs 5. It's 2 on color, so okay, maybe not easily splashed sometimes, but instant speed, return up to 2 target permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand. Not creatures, mind you, but permanents. That's really solid. Anytime you're able to get more cards back to your hand from the graveyard in limited, it's a powerful play because it's almost like drawing cards, but you're getting a little card selection. Now you don't have your entire library to choose from like a tutor necessarily, but you're kind of tutoring out of a small pool of cards, and that's pretty good many times, especially later in the game, right? This could be especially good if you're playing, say, Jung colors or something like that, because black does have a lot of sacrifice effects, so if you do sacrifice some things, you can get them back later, do it again. That could actually make this card even better on occasion, but it doesn't need much help. It's really good as it is. If you get a chance to play this, go for it. This could be a relatively high pick on common 2 in a draft pack. Root Snare, another reprint here, and this is okay. I'll be honest with you though, in these color combinations it doesn't feel amazing to me. Gruul wants to keep beating down, and yeah, I guess something could go wrong and it might be nice to have this as a backup, but I think you're just going to have other things in your deck that are better for Gruul. Simic, kind of the same story. Like, it's nice to have, but it doesn't contribute to what Simic's trying to do with building up counters and such. So I don't really see it. It's probably more of a Simic card than a Gruul card because Simic does have kind of the light control element around it. I have been known to try to draft a lot of these type of cards and make that a strategy, but I don't know if it would be that good in this set compared to other things you could be doing, honestly. So yeah, I might sideboard it in against certain matchups, perhaps, especially if someone's being really aggressive, like maybe a Rakdos build or something like that. But for the most part, yeah, I don't know if I always play this one. Sagittarius Volley. Do you hate flyers? Do you really hate Afterlife tokens? Well, this is the card for you. I wouldn't fault you for main decking this just because most of the time in Sealed or Draft, you pretty much run into a flyer, pretty much. Although, maybe if you come up against a good Gruul deck, you might not see a lot of them. So personally, I would keep this in my sideboard, but bring it in against flyers. Definitely bring it in against Afterlife. Sauralight Caretaker. This is nice because I always like mana dorks. However, this one is a little slow. It only costs 1, that's nice, and it's a 0/3, it can block some stuff. If I'm not main decking it for some reason, bring it in against Rakdos. This could really slow them down. But aside from that, you can tap this and another untapped creature you control to get 1 mana of any color. Now, if you really care about ramp, or you really care about fixing your colors, maybe you're trying to go real deep with colors, this is definitely playable. I guess the other place I might consider this is in Bant if I have High Alert, because it is a defender, I suppose. But I could see where sometimes you might actually skip this Mana Dork because it's that slow. Most of the time, though, I'll be honest with you, I think I just play it even in my main, because if I'm in green, and especially if I'm in Gruul, I will care about ramping enough to play this, I think. Silhana Wayfinder, great card for limited. Yes, a little slower than some traditional Wayfinders because the card you choose goes to the top of your deck as opposed to into your hand. But the give and take here is this is more sizable. This is a 2/1 for 2. It's nice board presence. So I play this 2/1 creature for 2, say on turn 2, hopefully, and I'm able to dig a little deeper in my deck. And I'm looking for creature or land, so it's pretty hard to miss in Draft or Sealed with this. I suppose it could happen, but most of the time it shouldn't. Early on, I want to hit a land. Trying to smooth my mana, trying to smooth my colors maybe if I'm trying to get a little greedy. Later on, though, when I got my mana, I'm hoping to hit a creature. So this is a small 2-drop that's good early, it's good late, maybe for different reasons, but it's going to be strong for you, even if it does slow you down just a little bit. Stony Strength. This is okay, it's cheap, I'm going to give it that. Puts a +1/+1 counter on a creature, so Simic could be interested in this some of the time. It is kind of a non-bow with Adapt, unfortunately, but there are other cards in Simic that just care about +1/+1 counters in general. We saw that a few days ago, so that could be good in combination with some of those cards. But this is also a combat trick. I mean, +1/+1 counter, untap a creature, you can surprise your opponent when they're attacking in. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Or you could use it offensively too, which is good, especially Gruul might be interested in that. The reason I'm kind of lukewarm on it is just because I think there's better things for the most part in this set. But some decks could play this, especially if you have a shallow pool. Sylvan Brushstrider. Yeah, this isn't thrilling to me. A 3/2 for 3, when it enters the battlefield, gain 2 life. It's going to trade down, and gaining 2 life doesn't feel like it's quite worth that most of the time. But if I'm up against a really aggressive build, maybe Rakdos again, I will sideboard this in and be very, very happy to do so. This could throw a wrench into their plans of hitting me with a lot of early damage. Territorial Boar. This is a solid 2/2 for 2. You know how I feel about my 2/2s for 2. This one's real good. Here's the thing, unless you have some weird sort of thing going on with like Mirror March or something like that, for the most part, when you play a big creature, you're only going to be playing one creature. So sometimes later in the game, this might be a 3/3 with Vigilance until end of turn. That's not necessarily crazy, but you know what? I'm still going to play this thing because a 2/2 for 2 is important. I'm not going to bore you. I know we already talked about it in this video series, but that is the most important part of your curve. Never neglect it. Titanic Brawl. Wow. This is a first pickable common in a draft pack. If you think you're going to be going into green at any time, you're going to want a copy of this because it's just awesome removal. Now, it's a fight ability, so yeah, you need a creature. That's kind of the drawback of these cards when it comes to green. But this is solid green removal. And if you happen to target one of your things with a +1/+1 counter, which if you're in Simic especially, you'll have those things, then great, it's even cheaper. Oh, but wait, Gruul has Riot, right? They could have +1/+1 counters on their things as well. That's awesome. But even if they don't, I mean, the difference of 2 mana or 1 mana isn't going to be that big of a deal for the most part in Drafter Sealed. You're going to play this even if you had nothing with +1/+1 counters in your deck for some reason. It's still extremely solid. Amazing removal for green here. Tower Defense. Green just cornered the market when it comes to the reprints. This one, I feel kind of similar to the card we saw a few moments ago. Like, it's fine. It's a fine combat trick. I would side it in against some problematic flyers or maybe the Afterlife mechanic or something like that. But I don't see myself starting with it. It's a little too defensive for Gruul. And yeah, maybe Simic will appreciate the defense a little bit in the early game. But for the most part, again, I think I'd rather just do things that are going to move my plan along in Simic. This might be interesting, though, in Bant with High Alert. Wilderness Reclamation. This card is kind of awesome for the constructed formats, so what are you going to do with this thing in Drafter Sealed is the question. For 4 mana, it's not always going to be great, unfortunately. You're going to want to have some instants or things with flash in your deck, and if you don't really have that, then there's not a lot of reason to play this other than to maybe buff your opponent, I suppose. Maybe a Bant deck would like this. I could see myself splashing this into an Azorius build more so than actually playing it in a solid like Gruul or Simic deck, honestly. So I do think it could be good there. Now, there are some mana sinks that are in the game. There's some good ones. So if you do have a strong mana sink, that could change the calculus on this card a little bit. So just look at what you have in your pool. Many times you might have good reasons to play it. Other times you won't. Okay, we're going to move into the Gruul Watermark green cards with Gruul Beastmaster. I love Riot. This is the first Riot card, so let me just get this out of the way. I think this is an awesome mechanic. It lets you make decisions on the fly when you play the creatures, and whenever you have the ability to make decisions, it makes the card, or the mechanic in this case, just that much more powerful. I love the fact that this could be a 2/2 haste creature or a 3/3 without haste for 4 mana, and it has an ability attached to it as well. Now, this ability definitely feels Gruul to me more so than Simic, because this will play very well with a trample creature, for example. And again, you could push across some damage with this thing. Attack in whether you're surprising your opponent by playing this and going with haste and just pumping something +2/+0, or slow it down, give it the counter, but next turn you can give something +3/+0 when this attacks in with it as a 3/3. On turn 4, that could actually be pretty annoying. And again, with trample creatures, this could be good in the long game too. One last note though, I talked a lot about Gruul with this card, but you know who likes +1/+1 counters? Of course, Simic. So if you decided to put a counter on this with Riot, it could interact with some of your other Simic cards, and that's actually cool too. Rampaging Rendhorn. Alright, this is just a nice economy common. You might not always play it, sometimes you'll have better stuff, but you know what? This is a curve filler that I won't be sad to play if I have to. 4/4 haste for 5, or 5/5 for 5, and I get to make the choice? That's actually really nice. So yes, like I mentioned before, Riot's going to work really well with Simic, it's going to work really well with Gruul. Just a real solid creature here at the 5 spot. Wrecking Beast. This card has a lot in common with the last one. It's a common for starters, see what I did there? Also, it's a big old creature. Now this one you do pay more for. It has Riot like the previous card, but it also has Trample, so that's pretty good. So for 7 mana, 7/7 Trample or 6/6 Haste Trample, those aren't bad decisions, right? So it's a little more expensive. If you can ramp into it, that's probably for the best, but you know what? 7 is not out of hand either for Drafter Sealed. Even if you didn't have any ramp, this is a strong creature that, again, maybe you have better top of the curve stuff if you get some fancy rares or something. But if you don't, this is very serviceable. Okay, let's move on to the red cards with the Gruul Watermark with Burning Tree Vandal. Real solid card here, and what I like about this is how Riot works so well with Rakdos too, because haste is what Rakdos wants to be doing. Also, this particular card, Rummaging, is another thing Rakdos really wants to be doing so that you don't run out of gas. So this feels almost more like a Rakdos card, but obviously it has Riot, which is why it's Gruul, and it's going to be just fine for you as a curve filler in a Gruul deck too. So ultimately, 2/1 Haster for 3 or a 3/2 for 3. I'm usually not a fan of the 3/2s for 3, but considering I have the option with Riot as well as the ability here to rummage, yeah, sign me up. This is a nice 3-drop. Clamor Shaman. Alright, yet again, it just feels like a Rakdos card to me. When this attacks, target creature an opponent controls can't block this turn. So, nullifying an attacker is especially good for Rakdos so they can keep the pressure on. It will be good for Gruul too, but I mean, Gruul's gonna stomp over everybody anyway, so right, who cares? But it could come in handy there too. I like that you could bring this in with haste and surprise your opponent, or if you need the beef, just put the +1/+1 counter on it and play it a little slower. For 3 mana, this is an awesome ability. This is splashable too, and I would consider splashing this in a deck where I'm not playing a lot of red. Ghor Clan Wrecker. Another card that just feels like it wants to be in a Rakdos deck. Forecasting cost 2/2 Menace Haste. If that doesn't sound Rakdos to me, I don't know what does. Or it could be a 3/3 with Menace. Gives it a little more beef, and maybe Gruul will appreciate that. It's the flexibility that's awesome with these Riot cards. I love this mechanic. Gravelhide Goblin. Now, this feels a little more Gruul because it has a mana sink with green in it. 2/1 for 2, though, those are aggressive stats, so if you threw this into a Rakdos deck on the fly, I don't think you'd be sad about it. But ultimately, this card will be best if you have some green, because that way it's a good early drop and a good late drop. It doesn't have trample or anything, but mana sinks are always going to be solid for you in Drafter Sealed, so when you have the opportunity to play something like this, I would go ahead and do it. It's not a 2/2 for 2, but it's pretty close. Here's a Mythic with Skargon Hellkite. 5 casting cost 4/4 flyer with Riot. This could just simply be a 4/4 flying haste for 5. Traditionally, those have been pretty good, even outside of Limited, so if you get this in Drafter Sealed, that alone is great. Now, it's got an ability attached to it as well, but to activate the ability, it does have to have a +1/+1 counter. So, now if you did that through Riot or through other means, it does activate this mana sink, which is actually pretty good, dealing 2 damage divided any way you choose among 1 or 2 targets. So not just creatures, but targets. This can go to the face and whittle down your opponent, or maybe turn on Spectacle for you Rakdos fans out there. Very aggressive card in the air. This is phenomenal for any deck. Again, the only bad thing I can say about it is it's double red. It's not easy to splash maybe, but who cares? This thing is amazing. Play it if you can work it in, and you're lucky enough to have this Mythic in your pool, of course. Okay, let's move on to the gold cards. Bulwark Clan Crusher. Here is a card that really just shows you how cool the design of this set is. Removing a +1/+1 counter to do 2 damage to any target. It feels real simple. It's on a 4/4 body for 5, but you could play this in a Gruul deck. Obviously, it's going to work with Riot. If you were playing some kind of Simic deck, maybe splashing red, for example, it's going to work with the Simic strategies. It's also going to work generally with like Jund colors if you're in Rakdos splashing some green, because it does do damage to any target. So again, it could turn on Spectacle. Like, it just fits into so many places. Now, on its own, in a vacuum, it's not amazing. It would be a fine curve filler. It might be a little slow since you have to tap this, but in conjunction with many of the other cards in the set, it's very good. Cindervines, this one's a rare. It's a cheap enchantment. It's more of a sideboard card, though. Like, if my opponent's playing a lot of non-creature spells, because consider in Drafter Sealed most of the time, decks are going to be relatively creature heavy. But for some reason, if I'm up against an Azorius build maybe or something like that, they may have more non-creature spells. If they do, I'll bring this in. If my opponent has a problematic artifact or an enchantment, I'll bring this in. It'll be nice to have in your sideboard when you need it. Clan Guildmage. Like all the Guildmages, maybe a tad bit slow, but it works well in Gruul. I mean, that first ability, target creature can't block this turn. Again, Gruul wants to just stomp all over everything. Sometimes it will be applicable, sometimes it won't, but you'll be happy to have it, I think, a lot of the time. It's relatively cheap to activate. If you're splashing a little green in your Rakdos deck, you might consider this card too. And then secondly, turning a land into a 4/4 creature on the fly is pretty interesting as well. And also, your opponent's got to pay attention to that when they're doing their combat math as well. And sometimes people miss stuff like that. So sometimes you might be able to steal a game out of nowhere because somebody didn't realize that you can animate a land. So pay attention to that too. Domri Chaosbringer. Okay, well, Domri's got to be amazing, right? He's a mythic, and yeah, he's amazing. 4 casting costs for 5 loyalty, quickly going up to 6. He ramps you, and also gives the creature you're casting, if you're casting a creature with the mana, Riot. Remember that Riot does stack as well, so if the creature already has Riot, then this will be a second Riot, so you could, in theory, give the creature a +1/+1 counter and haste. Or maybe 2 +1/+1 counters. Okay, that's awesome. Now, the downside to Domri is he doesn't directly protect himself. He is in Gruul colors. I mean, the colors of creatures, right? But he doesn't have, like, create a token or something. Now, the -3 is kind of close, but it does bring him down to 2 if you just played him and you go for that -3. But you're looking at your top 4 cards. In a lot of limited decks, that means you're going to hit at least 1 creature, many times 2. Hopefully you don't miss, but you could. I think on average, though, you're going to hit 1 or 2 creatures pretty frequently. And bringing those cards to your hand and then hopefully playing them at some point will be protection indirectly for Domri, but it is a little slow. And if he goes down to 2 to do that, he's going to be vulnerable. Now, the ultimate, if it does happen, wonderful. It's not really that far off. But if it does happen, your opponent could still beat you down in the air, maybe. But for the most part, if they don't have a way to finish you off quickly, they're probably in trouble within a few turns. That will get out of hand quick. It's a mythic. You're not going to see Domri a lot. But when you do, play him, even if you have to splash one of the other colors and you're not in Gruul. It's just a real solid card. Frenzied Arnix, here's a little more trample for you. 3/3 trample creature with Riot, so maybe a 4/4 sometimes, or 3/3 haste is good too. And it has a mana sink to pump its power +3/+0 until end of turn. Now it's an expensive mana sink, green, red, and 4. But again, in a board stall, the game's dragging on, and who knows, maybe sometimes you'll have 12 mana and that could be +6/+0. Really solid creature at 4, and this is a common as well, so look for it in draft. Gruul Spellbreaker. Now, as long as it's your turn, this will have hexproof and you'll have hexproof. Now, that's good. It's probably a little better in constructed formats, though. It's still good. And at the end of the day, who cares? Because this is a 3/3 Riot creature with trample for 3. I mean, that's great economy. So you're getting a lot here, as you should. It's a rare. You're not going to see it a whole lot, but it's an awesome 3-drop. It does make gameplay a little annoying for your opponent, but at the end of the day, I'm playing this because of those other stats. Nikia of the Old Ways. Okay, there is a downside here potentially. You can't cast non-creature spells. In a game of limited, if you're in Gruul, you're going to have a lot of creatures. In this set, you should have a lot of creatures with abilities. But you need removal spells sometimes, and it might be a little awkward if this is out and you can't deal with that flyer in the air that's beating you down or something, right? So keep that in mind. However, here's the upside. You get a one-sided mana flare. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. But you do have to have things to flare into, right? Mana sinks will be great. We just saw the card a moment ago with that buff. That would be awesome. Just a big old creature would be great. Unless you have a way to sacrifice this, it can't be anything other than a creature. But black does have a lot of sack effects, so remember that. Ultimately, though, a 5/5 for 5. The stats are okay, but I will play this card if I care enough about that mana flare. If I don't care about the mana flare in my deck, then I will skip this one so that I avoid that drawback. Ravager Worm. This is a nice mythic. I mean, it's a great price. 2 green, red, and 3 for this. 4/5 with Riot. Now, here's the funny part. When it enters the battlefield, choose up to 1. So you could do both in theory. However, there's actually no lands with an activated ability that is not a mana ability in the set. So, in standard, maybe you'll find a use for that, but not so much in draft or sealed. But who cares? Because this is potentially a 5/6 that's going to fight when it enters the battlefield. Or it's going to be a 4/5 that's going to fight when it enters the battlefield and have haste for 6 mana. Yeah, the thing is still kind of insane, right? So, yeah, if you're in the colors and you can swing that casting cost, play it. It's going to be phenomenal. Again, you won't see these mythics all the time, but this is really good. Rhythm of the Wild. Speaking of really good, and this one is an uncommon, so pay attention here. 3 casting cost, and it's an enchantment for 3. I don't always love those, but wow, they really push the enchantments this time. Creature spells you control can't be countered. That may or may not be relevant. It might be good against the Azorius. But here's what I like. Non-token creatures you control have Riot. Again, remember Riot stacks. That's kind of amazing for 3 mana. Every creature you play from this point forward, it's going to have that Riot option on it. Or maybe 2 Riot options. Yes, it slows you down a tad to play this and get it on the battlefield, but Gruul's going to catch up real quick with their size. I have no qualms about that. Imagine just giving all your creatures haste with this thing. Not even the +1/+1 counter, but haste. And we already talked about all the other benefits of Riot. I mean, if you're playing Rakdos splashing green, the haste will be great. If you're playing Simic splashing red, of course, the extra +1/+1 counters on things could be great. Although, again, it might not interact well with Adapt, but who cares? There's a lot of good payoff still. This card's going to be awesome. Rubble Belt Runner. It's got a cool ability. Can't be blocked by creature tokens. Good against Afterlife, perhaps. However, it's still a 3/3 for 3. It's a nice curve filler or common regardless. Maybe it doesn't always make your cut, but I think a lot of the times you just end up playing this if you're in these colors. Savage Smash. Okay, here's another removal spell now. This time it's sorcery speed. But costs 3. Target creature you control gets +2/+2, so it gets a little buff and then it fights. So it's a good fight spell. It's very economical. A little slower than the one we saw earlier, but who cares? You also get the buff here, which sometimes you could use before combat even. Use this on one of your trample creatures, for example. Now, it will take damage in the fight, but you can still push across the damage with trample in combat after that, and if it dies, it dies. Yeah, really, really solid card if you're in these colors. Splashable too. Sunder Shaman. Now, this is maybe one of my favorites of these double color cards that are in the set. Great uncommon here for Gruul. Now, the drawback being, yes, they are color demanding. 2 red, 2 green. They're not very splashable. But if you can swing the casting cost, play this, it's going to be amazing for you. This is not a sideboard card for artifacts and enchantments, although sometimes there'll be collateral damage. 5/5 for 4, granted, 2 red, 2 green again. But once this is on the battlefield, can't be blocked by more than one creature. No chaining a bunch of little creatures together to stop this thing. It can be chumped, sure, and that might get annoying with Afterlife or something like that. But eventually, if your opponent doesn't have an answer for this thing, they need a big creature, they need a removal spell sooner than later, or they're going to be in trouble. And that's really awesome for a forecasting cost card, even again, if it is tough to maybe always get out on turn 4. Now, this will be at its best if you can throw some counters on it. Green can do that. Now, splashing some blue, maybe that's a possibility, but that does get a little demanding with its casting cost. But green does have ways to get counters on things. We saw that earlier in the video even. So, yes, if you can get some counters on this, even better. Zhur-Taa Goblin. Real aggressive card here. 2/2 Riot for 2. Granted, 2 different colors, so maybe it's not always a turn 2 play. Maybe sometimes it's like turn 3. But a 3/3 or a 2/2 haster? Yeah, that's just a really solid common at the 2 spot. And again, you're going to splash this into other builds too. If you're going 3 colors, it could be good in like a Jund build, sure. But yeah, this is just solid all around. Here's a hybrid card with Rubble Slinger. Good curve filler, nothing crazy here. I might bring it in against a Rakdos deck that's being a little more aggressive, or a deck that has some small flyers or something along those lines because of the reach. I might not always start off with it in my deck, but if I have to, I'm not sad. It's a fine curve filler, and you do get some flexibility with the hybrid mana. Here's our first split card, Collision Colossus. Let's talk Colossus first because I do think it's a little more relevant in the Gruul colors especially. Great combat trick. Instant speed for 2, target creature gets +4/+2 and gains trample until end of turn. So I could use it defensively if I need to, great. But I really want to use this as an offensive combat trick. The +4/+2 and trample could really throw off the combat math, maybe even sneak in a victory here or there. And you might have a big dumb creature that can't get their damage across any other way. For just 2 mana at instant speed, this buffs that big creature and makes it even bigger. Collision is a little more situational, but it's an awesome card against a flyer. Maybe this doesn't do much against a swarm of Afterlife tokens, but if you have a big flyer coming at you, just 2 instant speed, 6 damage, that's pretty impressive. And if you're not main decking this for some reason, maybe you're not actually in Gruul, maybe you're just playing green and other colors, then side this in if you need to against the flyer. Thrash and Threat. This is awesome. All of these rare split cards have been home runs in this set. This one no exception. And usually it's because of the first side of the card, and that's kind of the case here too, but the second side's not bad and limited. Let's look at Thrash though. 2 hybrid Gruul. Instant. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature or planeswalker you don't control. This is not a fight ability. This is just straight on damage for just 2 mana. Could be 2 green, could be 2 red, combination of the 2. It will work into a lot of decks because of that flexibility. If you can cast it, play it, it's awesome. Now the threat side could come in handy, especially if you're already winning the game and you're trying to close the door. You don't need to destroy anything, so okay, I'll create a 4/4 beast token with trample. Wonderful for 4. Or if you don't have a creature of your own to target with Thrash, well, Threat might be a good fallback plan if you're behind. But you're really playing it for the Thrash side most of the time. That's amazing. Here's our one artifact. I won't talk about it a whole lot because we did talk about this cycle in the other videos, but it is Gruul Locket. I will say though, Gruul colors, it's kind of more interesting because of the ramp possibilities, ramping into these big Gruul creatures. Green always likes to ramp. So within colors, this may be a little better than some of the other lockets. And it's also good if you want to splash one or the other color. Last two cards, they're reprints, they're parts of a cycle, and of course they are lands. Here's the first one, Gruul Guildgate. 2 pieces of art here. I really love the back door of the Gruul Guildgate because it's just a door into the wilderness and there's just nothing else there. You can just walk around it. That's kind of awesome. So yeah, maybe that's my favorite out of all the pieces of art for these. But anyway, yep, Guildgate, you know what it does. We talked about it in other videos. Our last card is the Shockland for Gruul Stomping Ground. So again, we've talked about these in other videos, so I don't want to spend a ton of time on them, but they are rare. You won't see them all the time, but very playable and limited to smooth out your mana. All right, we made it. Wow, this has been an adventure doing these guilds. It's been fun though, and now I'm trying to get all these videos out as quickly as possible. You may have saw my note on the previous video, my computer finally died. It was on its last legs for a long time. I got a new one, but I had to try to figure out how to use everything, new software and stuff. I'm going to get the pre-release primer out as soon as possible, so that will be the next video. But until next time, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible through the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page, as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.